Welcome in the AI for You Cafe. Today, the presentation is themed Disposable Identities are Elementals in IoT. The speaker will be Rob van Kranenborg. He's the founder of Council IoT and IoT Day, at IoT Day. My name is Carmen McWilliams, and I'm the moderator and organizer of this cafe, and I'm the director of the company Grassroots Arts, located in Cologne, and partner in the European AI for You project. As always, we start slowly, so we give the participants a chance to come in, and I welcome you all. Thank you that on the summer afternoon you are with us. So what is this AI for You web cafe about? The web cafe offers a series of live sessions. The cafe is an online forum to gain insight in the European AI scene, and participants get the chance to share knowledge and experiences and meet stakeholders from various areas of AI research applications. Please take notice that the session will be recorded. No confidential information shall be shared in this cafe session. The speakers in the cafe express their personal view and opinions. This is not necessarily the official AI for You project opinion. So again, welcome everybody, and especially also welcome to Rob van Kranenborg. Hello, are you there?
Yes, yes.
Hello. I will shortly introduce you, Rob, and then I give you the moderator role. It's great that you're here today. Pleasure to meet you, to have you here. Rob van Kranenborg is the founder of Council IoT and IoT Day. He wrote The Internet of Things, a critique of ambient technology and the all-seeing network of RFID Network Notebooks 02, Institute of Network Cultures. He works as ecosystem manager for the EU project Target Smart, which is finished, and now for the next generation internet project NDI Forward. And again, I welcome you. Hello, Rob. I will now give you the moderator role. But before I do this, I just want to say to all the participants who came in today, great you're here again. And if you have questions to Rob during the presentation, please type them in the control panel on the right side. There's a control panel, and you can write them in, and I will read them afterwards to Rob. And as more questions, as more interesting gets this whole live session. So now I give you the moderator role, Rob. And Rob will not have his webcam on today. It's a technical problem, but we think it's fine. And welcome, Rob.
Hello, welcome. Thank you very much, Carmen, for having me. So I guess you see my screen now, and let me sort of try to make that permanent. Yes. So this is nice. Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's good, huh? Okay, so thanks everyone for listening, and I'm going to have a story. So I made the title and also the brief abstract as inaccessible as possible, so that sort of anyone who is expecting some kind of concrete instantiation of things or really, then you'll be very sort of disappointed. So if that's what sort of, I want to make it clear from the start that this is all ongoing stuff that we don't really know, and I also don't really know where this is all is going, but there's a lot of building blocks, and so that's what I would like to talk about today. So it's nothing fixed, it's just a lot of hopefully inspirational things, but also for myself, something that's starting and that I think we need to address. And so the story, the abstract, that was sort of deliberately as inaccessible as possible. I hope we get there. I think we can get there. But so what are we looking at? Basically, this Internet of Things. I think for most of you listening, because if you're listening to this, you have some insights and have some expertise, then you know it's really not something new that we're talking about, this basic automation in the 50s. And then it's going to pervasive computing in the 70s with IBM, ubiquitous computing in the 90s with Xerox PARC, ambient intelligence, Philips 2000. I think most of the work from Xerox PARC, Mark Weiser, also Philips, still incredibly relevant because they were just so far ahead, and actually they were talking about demos, and we are now living this situation that they described as only purely basically experimental. But as we know, the cloud hit in around 2000, and that made all the difference, because all that existed already as Internet of Things prior to 2000 then became very very logical in a sense, and with all of the data storage, everything that we talk about today is possible. So the Internet of Things, as envisaged by the automation drive from the 50s, basically linking up the four networks. So the body area network, the BON, the local area network, the home, the wide area network, the car, and the very wide area network, the smart city. And technically, these are logical terms. And so it was all about, and it still is about, trying to link up the body, the home, the car, and the city. And these interlinking points that have been occupied very early by Google, very early by the people, by Amazon, very early by the people who basically got it. Sort of, we know that at this moment in Europe, we basically are in a situation that we did not occupy these interconnecting points, and so our only chance is to basically occupy the entire field, or to take over the entire imaginary of this entire system, which of course China has done, building its own cybernetics, exactly doing this, linking up all these networks. And we're at the point in which we have to think about doing that, and AI seems to be one of the most sort of impressive candidates for doing that. So basically what is happening is that everything that's in these spaces is radiating data, is creating this potential for becoming a digital twin, and this notion of the digital twin where all the analog environment is somehow mirrored as a set of properties in some layer. This is now the default. So this is now happening. So what I would like to sort of build as an argument today is that on the basis of this IoT, we are building a world in which everything is being regarded as a set of properties. So people are a set of properties, cars are a set of properties, buildings are a set of properties, events are a set of properties. And it's at the layer, or at the instantiation, or the domain, or the space in which all these properties somehow come together, that we see that new entities are being made with these properties. And so what we are getting is new entities, event entities, that can consist of properties of what was formerly only people, as we know in the analog sense of the world, or goods, or objects, or machines. And this is a new ontological moment that we need to get agency on. I think this is a kind of logical moment of, let's say, Vint Cerf, Bob Kahn, TCP/IP, the internet. Then Tim Berners-Lee and Mark Andreessen sort of with the web, World Wide Web. Then we seeing sort of the over-the-top players, Amazon, sort of Ubers, reaping the rewards of the fact that this has become datafied in some sense and turning this into platforms. But now a next sort of moment is happening, and that's who is going to get their hands, or who is going to build the formats to define these new identities. And then somehow mixed in, there is this notion that identity is key, and then we have this self-sovereign identity idea that's coming up, and that's basically doing sort of mirroring what's happening, as it wants to take actionability not on the level of the person, the full person itself, but on the level of credentials that is simply said, let's say, one step below the person, that are verifiable claims and verifiable actions and certificated services that are tied to specific actions that are then verified on the level of the action itself, not on the level of the person. And that's kind of the main argument in the story, that this is somehow happening all across. So it's happening. It's kind of a theoretical moment that you can argue from a lot of different situations. And then, if this is all happening, then we have to talk about trust, and then we have to talk about conflict. Then the argument that I will make is that that trust is becoming very problematic in this space, because everything's dynamic in real time, all of the time, and that trust somehow seems to imply a kind of trusted position, but that position is never stable, so it's always shifting. So if you reach a position of trust, the only thing that you can reach next is position of distrust. So you're never going to make that. So it's much better not to talk about, or not to think about in terms of achieve trust or build trust, but to build tools for managing the conflict that is going to negotiate that trust. And one of the tools for that negotiation is something that we call now disposable identities, or ephemeral identities, or tiny identities, all terms that are really not really so important how you sort of want to name all these things. It's basically about the reasoning, and then that's leading us to this conceptual context of if this is happening, and if we think that we need to get some hands on this, some ideas about this, then what do we need to understand it? So what do we need to understand if we want to build some kind of strategic position on all of this? And then the question, of course, is if this is still at all possible, because in this analog world, we had these notions of strategy and tactics, and strategy was always about place, tactics was always about time. And this is also, of course, the rebel and the king. The king is in the castle, and the rebel is scheming with all types of. But if we moving into this hybrid world, it seems that these very notions of strategy and tactics are no longer really relevant, because the whole space-time it's no longer a metaphor. The whole space-time situation is changing itself. So what would it take to have actionability on that? And I think from what we've seen, you need to be that agency yourself. So you need to. It's no longer enough to be regulating, let's say, the environment. It's no longer enough to be kind of to have a vision. If that vision and if that regulation is not somehow hard coded, is not somehow in the offerings itself. So these goods and everything is becoming this radiating data, creating these digital footprints, can become these digital twins. And so the idea is that, or the problem is now that whoever gains agency on that layer is basically, let's say, the new Amazon. So maybe Amazon is already doing this, and they're already doing this, and China is also in a position of kind of building and naming these types of event identities, because they have this so much agency on all these layers. But it's not set. Nothing is basically set at this moment, and so we can think about it. We were having a lot of workshops in the NGR Forward projects, and in one of the workshops, it was in Ljubljana, I think, and yes, and there was really a moment for me, was very important moment, where somebody said, we were having all these conversations about these identities and how to break them down, and properties and credentials, and sort of. So there was this notion and this idea of a car accident with a self-driving car, and there were some persons coming from the insurance world And so they came with this example of what would happen if in this scenario or in this event, if a self-driving car hits a person, and then hits a rock, and then goes into the water. And then what is happening now is that all of these moments are getting a temporary identity. So the car gets a temporary identity, the person inside the car gets a temporary identity, the person hit gets a temporary identity, the water gets a temporary identity, the rock gets a temporary identity, whatever is in the vicinity, the lantern pole filming it gets a temporary identity. And all of these the identities are forming some kind of event identity. And it's on the basis of this event identity that new services and liability and accountability sort of will be built or is being built. And that's of course an kind of an ontological moment because it means that this is an extreme abstraction of what's happening basically in the real world because in the real world already the sensors are involved in building these types of temporary identities. But on a higher level, all of these are grouped somehow. Now, who's grouping them, and what's grouping them, and who is building the formats for grouping them? And that's, I think, the kind of layer or level where we have to get our hands on. And when I say us, I mean Europe as a 500 million zone, ideally also as some kind of cybernetics, ideally also hoping to go to some kind of scaling of a kind of Estonian model to a European federated model of a 500 million zone, where we have kind of centralized infrastructure in a smart way with all our tools, decentralized services, unlike that's happening in China at the moment, and then data stay with people as identity will also stay with people. That's kind of the vision or that we are aiming to push for Europe as a kind of a zone, which makes sense, I think. And it's also interesting to think like this because knowing that in Europe we lost the data wars, we lost the platforms. The next fight is on identity, and in every country in Europe at this moment, identity is being marketed. So because of regulation, in most countries now, identity is sort of basically on the market. So if you're in Belgium, like I'm in Belgium, then already 40–50% of identities in the hands of fully commercial players. It's me is a digital identity provider of banks and telcos and enabled by large cloud operators. And in itself, maybe we can debate this, we can argue this, which is kind of, but it's not negotiated. And we will see this happening in more countries. So this means that we will also, after losing data, after losing platforms for inclusive policies, we'll also lose identity for inclusive policies. And we think that that's unacceptable. So we think that we have to go towards this kind of more self-sovereign type of identities with huge custodians, because people, of course, are not educated in handling their own private keys. And so custodianship will be the main issue there. But the key is basically that all of this type of thinking is coming from workshops that we are doing all across Europe with all type of digital transition, AI, IoT, 5G type of experts. And so all of this thinking is coming from below. It seems very theoretical. It seems very conceptual. It seems very fluffy, and it is all of that. But it's also coming from below and practitioners, where it's kind of very real. So just to show that, I think one of the things that will happen pretty soon because of these type of event identities becoming mundane is pricing and dynamic pricing. So we basically are all aware that that if everybody here in this webinar would now, let's say, book a flight to Paris, if of course we can all fly, but let's say we can book a flight to Paris, we will all be paying different prices because all our online purchasing identities are basically harnessed in kind of algorithmic processes we have no control over. And And this will go offline soon. So within 3 to 5 years, this very notion of dynamic pricing that's basically now relatively unseen at the back end will go into the supermarket. So you will try to buy a package of coffee, and you will put your phone to a QR code, and you will get your price, and somebody else that's with you will get his or her price. So I think there'll be an app soon to sort of compare these prices and sort of maybe fix the difference. And I tried to sell it to a couple of VCs, but nobody was interested. Maybe somebody now go and grab it and do it. It's very much in the air. But the point is that this is only possible because of the extreme real time of the situation in which we basically have disambiguated from goods and people and events and locality and services. So this QR code that is pointing to a good or an object existing in time, in a location, in a place somewhere, but it's actually the service of its existence is only happening when you scan it at a particular moment in time, in which then an entire operation starts for you to have that price at some point, which is different on a Monday for a Tuesday or 3 o'clock or 10, or when it's hot or cold or all of these things. I think we can all be quite aware that that if this is happening, and this will happen, that we need to have some public agency on it. And then public agency, in my view, is no longer, let's say, going back to the old states, they are dying, or handing this to another over-the-top player like Amazon, who's basically capable of doing this, but to this new type of cybernetic agency in which people from government, people from business, citizens, all kinds of groups come and build, just as ICANN was built for the internet, a type of ICANN for the Internet of Things. That's kind of the main thing to do. And so one of the players that were going to be basically also involved in or are involved in building these types of services is, for example, Coalition. So coalition.org has basically mapped everyday life. So every object, every action, let's say tying your shoelace with your left foot, or with your left hand, sorry, with your left foot if you want to, but tying your shoelace of your left shoe is a number. Tying your shoelace with your right hand sort of like is a number. Brushing your teeth with your left hand is a number on a Monday. So basically they've clustered all of the human activities, and then they've basically classed them, subclassed them, and then build those into some elements. So it's just very interesting. It's all JSON files. You can download it. You can play with it. It's being pushed as a privacy by design kind of feature, which it of course is and can be seen as, but of course it can also become an incredibly intrusive tool if it's simply embedded in a Nest or in the cameras that are out there at the moment. And of course this is going to happen. So probably what will happen is, and this is the key to thinking about, that we need to sort of think about and readdress these notions of identity, because identity in this constellation is not just you showing some credentials or you sort of being, but it's basically being identified by behavior. And this type of these type of tools that are already in motion, in action, and can become, and already also becoming quite mundane, will be helping, of course, in these behavioral identification moments. And again, also that will be very mundane in the sense that this behavioral education will be instrumental in getting you your price, in determining what the price will be of certain goods, and this is basically then all part of this the shift that we are seeing from a world that we know in a kind of analog sense, to a world that we basically also know in this kind of virtual sense, where we have this world in which we see all these objects, we see the the tablets, we see the computers, we see the phones. But of course, if with Internet of Things, it's basically all infused, and objects are all objects are basically made out to be readable with some kind of code or some kind of addressability, and most or other objects with some kind of have some kind of processing power, sort of like, then yeah, we cannot really we cannot expect to have our cakes and eat it. So at some point, the ontological notion of the world is changing, and the very conceptual basis for thinking in terms of people and goods and machines and events as separate entities is no longer tenable. And so that's the moment in which we're in. And so it's not unlogical that although this is happening also quite subconsciously, because a lot of the things are happening sort of parallel, which is the beauty, which also makes me sort of believe that this is true somehow, if I can use the word, is that we see a lot of new attribute-based ideas and models. So, for example, there is this absolutely beautiful use case in Holland where and it's interesting that it's coming from the energy company and the police. So it's not really coming from these old entities of, let's say, the states. It's coming from actors in the state that are really also surprisingly somehow acting at some point. And they found that in the city of Utrecht, there was a large number of people getting in trouble with credits from all kinds of service providers. But because of GDPR, the city was unable to send the details of these people to these service providers, and so they came up with the idea of, based on an IDIN identity provision that is horizontal, adding attributes from the IRMA model, putting that on the blockchain, and that number, let's say, or that equation, that number, that went to the service providers. So then the service providers were able to act on indications that a client would get into trouble at some point without knowing who that client was, and that these types of schemes are getting more apparent, are becoming more logical. Again, it's coming from below. It's coming from deep needs in energy companies and also from the police, who see that people get into trouble because of very good privacy regulations that are somehow then working against them. Need to find good solutions, and this is one of the solutions that they came up with. So I'm just taking this notion of the self-sovereign identity from sovereign. Basically, this is about kind of it's again a lot of things are happening in parallel. So this is also, if you think about it, about registration of people. In China, registration of people began 278 BC. So with the first emperor 300 years before Christ in our historical timeline, started his first act was building a registration, people registration, let's say, service, and very tough one too, meaning that if somebody did something in the street, the whole street could be punished. The whole point is that if we think about the social credit system at this time in China, of course, it's about control to a large extent, but there's also other things happening there. One of the things is this idea, this notion that identity and somehow and administration are very, very, very linked and tied in Chinese history and philosophy. Now, go to Western Europe. Our registration of people started with Napoleon, with the Code Napoleon, about 18 something very, and so it's only very recent that we have this type of things. What we are now seeing, and I think what we definitely see this with COVID and the crisis and the contact tracing, is that, for example, in Singapore, where only 20% or slightly less than 20% of people downloaded the app, the contact tracing app. And in France, I think it was like a few percent that sort of did at this moment. We see that the two main registration bubbles, let's say, of the state with passports and of the commercial providers with telephone numbers have led to a situation in which the carrier in which all of this is harnessed, the smartphone, is somehow become, for most people, an untrusted kind of environment. And so it's quite logical in some sense that if these two large bubbles of registrations of people with their vast sort of sets of services of control and surveillance, but also very good services of dependence, are being seen by people as becoming untrustworthy, that new forms will spring up. And one of the forms then seems logical, that citizens who up until now have been given identity issued by either a state that's basically also self-assigned this capability, as it's only also a model of 350 years of the Westphalian kind of model of the state. It's not set in stone, and it's probably also, as it is, sort of withering away already a little bit. And these commercial providers that basically tie everything to a phone number or an email, if these sort of sets of domains are becoming sort of untrustworthy, people are beginning to think maybe it's about time that we sort of set up our own issuing of core of our identity, so that we are able to authenticate our own identities with the credentials that in a way we've been issued, but also in a way that we can make ourselves. So that's the beauty of this kind of whole layer of credentials. You can use credentials of, let's say, a driver's license or a passport, but you can also start building new types of credentials, and that's where the W3C sort of working group is basically all about. So for me, what's interesting is that basically it's about a moment in time that this is all happening. So the key about this self-sovereign identity is not, to me, that citizens want to have more power against states or commercial entities. That's one argument, and that's happening. But what's more interesting is that there is some kind of a story, or let's say some kind of a narrative happening that wants to take away this full agency on this one person or the one good or the one object or the one machine, and it wants to go down to the level of properties of these systems and of these people and goods and machines, and that's, I think, more. So that's more deep, in a sense that that's the driver. The driver is not the fact that people want to sort of escape from systems of control. That's also a driver, but that's basically, I would say. But I think where we have to look as people building new systems or going to build new systems is we're going to have to work with this tendency of everything to go towards properties, and then of course to think about what are the mechanisms and what are the tools for putting together new entities from these properties, and which of these entities are going to be seen as valid or non-valid. And I mean, that's going to be the whole kind of story. So this notion of disposable identity then came up. If we argue from self-sovereign identity, then this notion of this disposable identity is basically hard coding GDPR. Now, the beauty of GDPR is that it says that if you deal in data, then that data should have some kind of reciprocity with the person who was kind of offering it and the person who's using it, and that in that process, it's extremely important that that activity is purpose only, that there's no function creep, that is time limited, and that that is also quite transparent that is time limited, that things are being destroyed, that things are being stopped. And so if we put together this self-sovereign identity, then it's possible from self-sovereign identities to actually to make these disposable identities as kind of smart contracts with service providers. So, for example, if I'm living in a house where I'm living, and if I'm renting it, and if I have to pay my energy bill, the energy company doesn't have to know anything about me. They just have to know that I can pay. So if I was able to send them a credential or a token or some kind of a cryptographically proven smart contract, basically all the same terms, saying sort of with some kind of a assessment or assurance about not only how much money I have in the bank, but that I've paid all of this for 10 years now and I haven't missed a payment and sort of all of these things. That should be enough. And of course, I can include my home number, because if I don't pay, then through that number, the energy company could track me and say, you need to pay. But I could go all my life paying through with that type of activity, this kind of contract. And no other type of data or information about me should be changed. It seems to be quite logical. So what we are proposing is to build in that European cybernetics this notion of disposable identity. So we take every form of data transaction, every form of data, every form of service contract to this level of action, purely on the level of what is needed and what is the purpose and what is time limited. We simply hard code GDPR. It's nothing more than that. And so at the moment I'm just listening. So with my own company, I'm part of this Etsy group. There's a tremendous amount of work going on. I do absolutely nothing. I just read the mails. So I think there's I think it's big respect for everybody who's doing the work there. And we proposed these specifications, and the idea was okay, move to technical committee cyber of Etsy first, and then we can actually have a conversation about it. So that's what we're doing now, and we're taking our time because there's no hurry with this, but we're taking our time to try to go to TC Cyber and work on the real kind of, let's say, potential definitions of these disposable identities. And sort of this I will go quickly here because it's also the main sort of everybody who's interested in this. I'm working with Petros Kavasalis and Gail Legar on this, basically also as part of the NTI Forward project. And so for all these technical issues, I'm going to have to refer everyone to Petros, but in order to sort of to build a story, sort of this is basically the idea that. And again, it's all about breaking down, and this is very difficult. I mean, this is the key issue for us, I would say. We're people, we've grown up in this analog environment. Of course, we have millennials and we have younger people, and they already are thinking differently. You feel it, but still, it's extremely difficult for us to look with the, let's say, more disembodied and disambiguated eyes of this or a computer, or let's say the storage or the AI layer, in which and for which all of these entities are simply sets of properties. But that's the kind of situation that we have to go. And then I think it's quite interesting that when this is logical, when this is possible, then we have these ideas of verifiable credentials, of self-sovereign identity, of this notion of this disposable identities. and these disposable identities then are logical and possible because they start from this self-sovereign identity. So that's a prerequisite for having that. And so I will skip this as well. This I will probably if you just mail me if you want this slide set, if you want to hear more about it. We also have things online at disposableidentities.eu. So that's also, you can find more information about that. And let me now go to sorry, there you are. So that's basically the key. There's a wallet. There's verifiable credentials being stored. There is a collection of identity attributes that can only be linked by the subject, which are these disposable identities. And so this is the key element, is that, and the beauty of this, I think, is that it's actually, it seems like an incredibly radical idea, and actually it is law, it's legal. This is GDPR. And what's also very interesting, at least from my personal point of view, was that I was in the Internet of Things expert group in 2010 when Gerald Santucci brought together 150 experts, and we had 2 people in European Parliament that actually came out with a press release about talking yogurt pots. So in Europe at that time, we had a tremendous opportunity, 2009, 2010, 2011, to take all the issues that I talk about now, of course, in more nascent form, but we were discussing this already in the group. And what came out of that group was GDPR. It was the Article 29 Working Party, Gwenda Legrand, and the French, who basically built GDPR from that group that was halted, unfortunately, and maybe also politically, well, very, very unfortunately, by Nelly Kroes. And well, we don't know reasons for that, but that's a different story. But sort of the point is that at that moment in time, basically, we coming from, let's say, this Internet of Things environment, were extremely upset that we were going to have this legal answer in Europe to, let's say, this massive shift in digital transition. But actually now, 10 years later, it's a tremendous asset, and it's also a tremendous unique selling point, especially if we can hard code it. And this is now possible. So we can hard code this GDPR. We hard code in the entire data transition, but from whatever it is, the fact that it has to be temporary, anonymous, yet official, and dynamic. So the way this works, and quickly look at this, this is one of the things that we are building, especially for events. And so basically, you can imagine you have you have proof of identity of a ticket's owner on a separate wearable. The disposable identity links the 2 elements, identity and access right, in a privacy preserving way. So every ticket for people pursuing that in an event may point to a disposable identity. And so it's always about, in building this kind of large event identity, so it's also always about, at the point of purchase, the identity can be disclosed, but then when accessing, you go into another mode, and it allows you to do things in a very minimalistic way, And then basically for the event site itself, it knows where people are without knowing who they are. So that's kind of the key aspect. So I'm closing because I keep talking, huh?
Yes, slowly but surely.
I'm sorry. Okay, okay, 2 minutes, and then I hope there's some people left because I mean, but so very quickly. So, what kind of a world is this? So, we're in a world of entities, event-oriented, and it's basically no more people, good machines. And now, if we don't create in Europe, or if you have some kind of a domain company, if you don't create these new notion of identities, the capabilities of these old categories will be fully under control of the new over-the-top players. And that can also be, of course, GS1 combined with Amazon or something, because this is going to happen together with this coalition type of behavior. So in this event-based world, trust is not a static position. So if you build trust, it will always turn into distrust. So we have to move away from trust as a key to conflict. And if we do that, then we can think about tools, tools for mediation of that conflict. Now, this is the last slide, and this is a bit far-fetched, but it shows that all our current systems are really unable to deal with this. And I mean, representative democracy, the legal system, sort of which also why we have to hard code GDPR, but it's all going. So if this is happening, how can we basically think about the legality in a moment like this? So in the Middle Ages, they brought trees to court. So in this way of thinking, it's going to be easy to, well, easy is not the right word, but we can basically focus on the interplay of effects, and that's a bit the idea.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. You are ending.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my God, I spoke way too long. Sorry.
But thank you very much, and it's super interesting. I mean, number one, we have to somehow find out how the participants who are interested, they can get this PowerPoint, right? They can get it as well as they can write to you, no? And then you send it to them, right?
Yes, I would be sort of. I would be very happy if people would like to discuss and talk about this, because, like I said, I'm sort of at the moment I'm just presenting, let's say, the kitchen, but I know there are some great recipes coming from this, but I don't have a clue where they're coming from. But we see all these building blocks, we see all these things happening, and so maybe there are people who have insights into this that we can then sort of put together or set up a workshop. Yeah.
Yes, there comes right away my question. You are founder or of the council IoT and IoT Day. What is this? Is this a platform, community? What can we understand under this?
Well, can you transfer back to me?
You have it. You're completely still in.
Oh, so you see council? Yeah. Well, basically, it started from same. So in 2000, I went to a conference in Jönköping, Building Tomorrow Today, and this was when, for the first time, I saw the Future and Emerging Technologies group that was working on iCube, Intelligent Information Interfaces, and the discipline computer. And this was brilliant, and I was totally blown away. And it was but I was also blown away in the sense that there was no debate about this in society, and no debate on this with other actors like cultural actors, theorists, philosophers. I mean, artists, designers. There were designers in this brain computer. It's actually a very good program. But a guy came on stage. It was Dr. Norbert Streitz from Fraunhofer, and he said, in 10 years' time, you will all have a Bluetooth ring. You walk in the woods. You'll point your ring at a tree. A screen will pop up, and you will look at the screen. You will get information about the tree.
Yes.
And I was sitting in the audience with 300 people, and everybody seemed to be fine with that, and I was totally shocked.
Mm-hmm.
So I come from literature, so it took me 10 years to bring it down to thinking and writing about it, and to build council. So I built council in order to have a voice in industry, because it's a 400 group globally of Internet of Things experts. But for me personally, also to understand how it is possible that basically a subset of human intelligence has been able to build its optimizing paradigm, and to take that paradigm and really take over all capabilities of future future vision. And so I needed to understand that. And so when I understood that, I realized, so I'll build council, and council has been around now for 10, 11 years. And I made IoT Day specifically also for this reason, April 9 as a day for 10 years now also, to discuss these things. Because this whole transition is not discussed. And what I talked about today is the next level of basically the disappearance of technology as technology, not only in the everyday, which is the definition of Internet of Things, but now we are sort of witnessing the definition of like the disappearance of technology as technology in the conceptual modeling itself. That I find very interesting, but I also find that very worrying. That this is not, and that's why I think, I mean, this, at least in China, you can discuss this with politicians, technologists, theorists, and engineers. That's why we lack this. There's no theoretical, philosophical moment for us to discuss these things. Sort of, there's fortunately there are now some people with von der Leyen who understand this. All people from the online group, all online group, who have deep knowledge about these things, but we need a lot more. And so I'm also worried that Breton is not surrounded by this type of thinking, and so we need to. Yeah, I think it's so. I've been just looking at it from time to time and building kind of potential, negotiation tools. To me, Council and IoT Day are also negotiation tools.
Yes, let me just thank you for this answer. I want to allow the audience also to ask some questions. Here comes Nathalie Saint-Pierre. What would be an effective governance model to ensure world peace and efficient institutions? Have you considered the Agenda 2030 and the 17 SDGs as a possible framework to monitor the tools?
Not specifically like this. I think that's a great idea. We've been looking into this. So in Council, we're writing now an article for the Springer Handbook of Smart Cities, and there were people coming with this idea of looking at the SDGs and tying them in. And I think that's extremely good idea. But the way, but I think we need to. So we need another step now, because we need a step that also understands this new hybrid kind of moment, and that's not in the SDGs. So so we need basically a kind of an update of the SDGs with this type of thinking in mind. But I'm very happy to discuss this. Yeah, definitely.
So Nathalie, please join the IoT Day. And now another question. Cohen Cobbett is the European. Here comes a question from Cohen. The European Commission is currently performing surveys on a number of European data spaces it wants to create, for example, for energy, transport, health, etc. The idea is that silos are broken and that individuals get control of their data. What advice would you give to the European Commission? That's the question.
Well, I think we had so NGI Forward, so IoT Council and Elontech. We organized a webinar last month in European Parliament. It was moderated by Eva Kalli on identity, and we had a really good group of speakers, both from industry, Remy Knecht from It's Me, Daniel de Sar from the blockchain from EPSI and the Blockchain Coalition, the convener. And basically what we understood was, and this was Eva Kalli's sort of assessment, that the digital single market basically lacked this first step, which is identity management and identity issuing. So I would say that the Commission now would need to look at, ideally, Europe as the European Union, European Commission should think about building European credentials, a European passport maybe, and then
Yes.
ideally also, yeah. So that's kind of the way to look beyond data, because data is now, because it's identity that you need to.
Yes. So, I mean, you are basically a strategic advisor. This project is also strategic, like this NGI Forward is a strategic project, right?
Yes, so NGI Forward is the strategy team for the next generation internet, and the workshops that I've been doing, I have been doing them with Gail Lagarde, who's a policy expert, and the project officer, Anania, is extremely resourceful and good. And she was also talking in the webinar, and so we have some. It's always difficult, of course, to think about having impact or things, because we do understand that this type of talk seems, and it is, of course, also a lot of, there's too much messiness and fluff around. But most people forget that it's from this messiness and fluff that these actual things actually also will get built at some point. So you need to go through this kind of awkward phase, and I would love to go through this awkward phase with more people together. Because if we get this right, we have all the building blocks. And in Europe still I really think that Europe still has all the building blocks in a much better, more actionable way than any other block in the world. But if it doesn't get its vision right on identity, it may lose after data and platforms and the actionability of the AI layer. That would be, at this moment in time, because we always see the capabilities of the Amazons and of, let's say, the Chinese sort of system as this integrated zone system, that will be detrimental at this moment in time. So you have to get the basics right, and the basics, unfortunately, are coming with this new with trying to get your hands on to build the new notions, that build the new formats that inform this new type of thinking. And that's definitely what we are discussing with lots of people, and it's in a way, I think it's happening in a way, things are really getting across, but we need a lot more people.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, it's already 4 o'clock, so I must. There are more and more questions. I mean, and you heard that you can talk to Rob also directly, and he also has basically a community. So if you are interested, please contact Rob, and I think Rob will be happy to speak with you. I'm very happy you are here. Super interesting. Yeah. But as always, time runs, and so I want to welcome you already for tomorrow. That's tomorrow, unbelievable. But yes, we have tomorrow another cafe. The cafe will be called "How is AI helping companies to deal with massive admin workloads?" And the speakers will be this time Gonzalo Izaguirre from Bosonit, Spain, and Miguel Garcia. He's the Director of Innovation of Bosonit. So maybe if you feel like, come back tomorrow, and then that's the last thing I'm saying, and then we make a gigantic summer holiday. I hope you all have a good time and relax. And after we come back in September with our series of cafes, hopefully again weekly, and our first icebreaker in September will be Wouter Denaya, CTO for IBM Belgium, the future of AI. But you will, as always, get invitations for this. So hope to see you soon. Thank you again, Rob. Thank you for everybody who joined today this live session. Thank you and have a good afternoon. No? Bye, Rob.
Bye. Thank you for having me. Thank you. Bye.